All right. So welcome, everybody. I'm Kathy Lilgren. I work in the admissions team for the Stanford MSX program, and I am so glad that you guys are all here to join us today and hear from our esteemed alumni who are recent grads of the program. And, today's session is really just to talk about what the program's like with the specific lens for the women's experience. And we know, just based on our demographic, a lot of women may be interested in the program, but they're also juggling a lot of other considerations, family and career, as well as just their personal interests. So it's wonderful to hear from students that have actually done this program. So today's session, I'm going to just basically start with some questions to our alums, and then really turn it over at the end to all of you out there to ask them any specific questions that may be on your mind that we didn't get a chance to address. But I'm going to help Jen try to get her on screen. But before we go into the details, I would love for Kate and Jen to introduce themselves, and maybe you guys can start and tell me, when you graduated, what were you doing before you joined the MSX program, and what are you doing now? So do you want to start, Kate? And then I'm going to see if I can get Jen on camera.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. So my name's Kate French. I graduated in the class of 2021. There's Jen, yay. And we're kind of neighbors, so this is funny for us to see each other on Zoom, but be like half a mile apart too. So I graduated in the class of 2021, and prior to MSX, I worked in education. So I actually helped found a highly innovative and successful charter school on the west side of Chicago. It was a public high school in conjunction with the Chicago Bulls professional basketball team. So I was an educator before, and post MSX, I'm in a unique position right now. So I'm actually on maternity leave. I have a 3-month-old son at home, which is very exciting. And then I'm weighing some options for once that leave ends, all of which were not options for me prior to MSX.
Great. And Jen, I'm not sure how much you heard, but we'd love to get a little bit of background about, when you graduated, what were you doing before coming to MSX, and what are you doing now?
Perfect. Yeah. Good morning. Hi, neighbor. Apart from being Kate's neighbor, I am actually Canadian. So I came down from the program from Vancouver. I was an Olympic athlete representing Canada for 10 years, and then spent most of my professional career in the not-for-profit space. So co-founded an organization that supports Olympic athletes in an athlete-centric way, bringing integrative training teams together. And then just before coming to the program, I led a sport organization and safe sport program. So building up a sport adjudication system from the ground up and managing culture change with 800,000 members. So, and now I am a health tech startup entrepreneur, which is pretty fun to say. And still I pinch myself that I'm able to do this, and it's all because of the program, really.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you kind of caught the entrepreneurial bug while you were here?
I've always had the entrepreneurial bug. I decided to be an Olympian at the age of 9. And I think around the same time I wanted to be an entrepreneur, like that was something I aspired to. And I did a lot of entrepreneurial work within a not-for-profit world, but I didn't have access to the ecosystem, and I didn't have the confidence to make the jump. And that's really what, MSX has afforded me.
So maybe Kate, you can start and tell people, what was your biggest motivation for making the decision to apply to the MSX program? What was the catalyst for you?
Yeah, I got to a point where I wanted to be able to to broaden my impact. So I was working in the education space, and I saw a lot of great leaders, and I saw a lot of great innovations, and I saw a lot of things kind of falling through the cracks when it came to the business acumen and the business knowledge. And so in order to broaden my own impact, I felt like I needed to invest in myself and show that I had a lot of on the ground experience per se, but I didn't have it wasn't something that was immediately transferable when you went out into the world outside of like nonprofit or education. And so that was a big catalyst behind what I applied. And then the secondary piece is I grew up on the West Coast and I had been based in Chicago, and I had kind of a drive to proximity, be closer to family as well.
Yeah, totally. And how about you, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar to Kate. I was looking to put all of my energy into an area where I could have a large impact. So I came from a really rewarding role that operated at a system level, but hugely frustrating and very slow. And I didn't feel like I had full control of driving that impact. Also, I really, being an Olympic athlete affords me an incredible platform, but people have a very hard time moving past that. I have other skills other than throwing myself down a mountain. And so from a perspective of where I think I would thrive and where people responded to me was actually quite hard to overcome. And so I wanted to, broaden my exposure and obviously my learning, but also be able to enter new ecosystems because of that. So those were the main factors.
Yeah. So I'm sure, you guys were comfortable in your roles, you were doing well in your job. What were some of the biggest concerns you had about saying, you know what, I'm going to take the risk and do the program? What were some of the things that were weighing on your mind when you were going through the whole assessment process? Why don't you start, Jen?
Sure. So I'm a mom of two. I have two boys, 7 and 9, and full stop, it was family for me. For me, I mean, there was no question I wanted to do this. It had been on my mind for quite a few years. It wasn't just a snap decision. It was actually quite a long process to have the conversation with my family, to start to seed the idea, to think about what this could look like. We were all very comfortable, in Canada. And so I was tremendously worried about uprooting my children, about, being very busy. But at the end of the day, we couldn't have afforded them a better year than what they had living on campus and the way they grew. For sure, there was a lot of pressure on the family. It wasn't an easy experience, but it was an incredible experience for all of us.
Yeah. And so they went to the local schools here, I take it?
Yeah, exactly. They were 6 and 8 at the time, and they got to learn riding their bike to school on their own, playing in the courtyards. They had such freedom, which I really value, and exploration rights around campus. And I couldn't have afforded them that in Canada, in the neighborhood we lived in, which is a great neighborhood, but it's just, it's not like living on campus.
Yeah. Oh, and we're lucky. Catherine joined us. Hi, Catherine. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and do a quick introduction and tell everybody kind of what you were doing prior to MSX and what you're doing now, and when did you graduate?
Sure. So sorry for having a little Zoom trouble getting in. I'm happy to be here with everyone. So I'm Catherine Garlinghouse. I am part of the MSX class of 2021 with Kate. Pre-MSX, I was working in the world of traditional energy. So I worked for Chevron. I was a non-engineer in the energy world. So immediately prior to leaving, I was the head of communications for a major organization-wide transformation that affected the whole company. So coming to Stanford was kind of my version of change as well.
And what are you doing now?
Oh, and now, so I made the conscious choice while I was in MSX that I was going to be fully in the academic world for my year in the program, and then spent the time afterwards kind of figuring out my next steps. So I've been doing several consulting projects, and I actually started a podcast while I was in the program that I have been continuing.
What's it called? Let's do a plug for Catherine here.
Well, it's called Energy Futures. You can find it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Very exciting.
You have a good voice for it, so good for you. So we were just talking about kind of also the motivations and biggest concerns for applying to the program. Why don't you tackle that, and then we'll go to Kate. But what were some of your biggest considerations or concerns about you stepping out of the workforce to go back to school?
It was really interesting. It came at a very interesting time for me. And I was worried on a number of levels. So, I was thinking, I probably passed my window for a traditional 2-year MBA program. I don't know if the trade-off is worth it for me to be out of the workforce for that long. And then when I found MSX, it started to give me that feeling of, oh, maybe there's a middle ground. Because I didn't really want to do the kind of exec MBA, nights and weekends route. I wanted something that was more all-encompassing, but I didn't really know what that meant. So for me, I was worried about stepping out of the workforce for that long. I was worried about, will my skills somehow get unmarketable in this period?
Mhm.
But ultimately, 1 year for MSX and the idea that it could be fully in person was really, it was helpful. It gave me that, this is the experience that I'm looking for. And, it's at Stanford. So I didn't bring children with me to the program like Kate and Jen, but I did bring a husband. And, part of the, oh my gosh, what are we doing was, we loved our home, we loved where we lived, and convincing him that it was the right thing to do to move out of our wonderful, very adult apartment to back to campus housing in our mid to late 30s. What? But there is a certain amount of magic of actually being at Stanford that really made it easy, and kind of similar to how Jen and Kate, talked about how much fun their kids had. I think my husband had just as much fun discovering all the facilities around campus as well.
Yeah, I always think the spouses and children have way more fun than the students because they get to really enjoy everything and they don't have to study.
Totally.
Oh, Geraldine, so glad you made it.
Hi, Catherine.
Yeah, how are
Yes,
you?
thank you for resending the link. It was
Actually, yeah, my apologies. It seems like we had some technical glitches, but Geraldine, I would love it if you want to introduce yourself to everyone and just tell folks when you graduated, what were you doing before you came to MSX, and what are you doing now?
absolutely, yeah. So I graduated with the class of MSX 21 in December 21, and I'm currently senior leader of culture and people experience at Amazon.
Cool. So you kind of went back to Amazon after you
I
finished the
did.
program. So
I
you're
did.
like a returner. And where are you based now?
Yeah, they affectionately call it boomerangs.
Mhm. And where are you based?
I'm currently based in San Francisco.
Okay. So you didn't return back to, she's another Canadian.
Mhm.
So great. Well, that's wonderful. So, and Kate, I was going to just circle back to you if you want to talk about a little bit about some of your biggest concerns and considerations about coming to MSX and leaving the workplace.
Yes, I feel like I'm just echoing what my esteemed colleagues have said, but it was, for me, it was family. It was moving us across the country, not as far as other people come to do the program. We were just coming a few-hour flight, but it was a big deal. I had at the time a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Actually, I guess they were like 4 and almost 2. My math is great here. And so I think that was a big consideration. And then also it meant my husband changing jobs. And so we made the decision to come, and then he was able to get a job out here, which was great. And then I think the second piece too was I really liked what I was doing before. I had kind of felt like I was maybe not growing at the rate that I wanted to anymore, but that didn't take away from the fact that I loved the organization and loved the work that I was doing. And so that was a difficult decision in terms of like to leave that, knowing that we probably wouldn't be moving back just because of like family and life choices afterwards.
Yeah. So I'll throw this open to anybody on the panel. Maybe you guys, somebody can share what were the biggest learnings about yourself and leadership that you got out of MSX during your year on campus? Who wants to take that one?
All right, I'll jump in.
All right.
See, I'm in a different class. I graduated in MS 2022. So like, yeah, I can diverge from the crowd here. So, I mean, the biggest gift of MSX for me was being in a cohort of such diverse classmates and peers. And from that, everybody's superpowers kind of emerge. and you see how diverse of a range it is. And that also allowed me to recognize where my state of flow and my contributions are. And my classmates really helped me see that and helped elevate me. And I think that was a huge gift. And also understanding that sometimes we're seeking so much outside of ourselves, but a lot of it's already within us. So that was a big gift. And then just learning a whole new, vernacular and just moving at the rate of business in Silicon Valley and exposure to that was those two things combined. Were really the topic part of the experience.
I like that you called them gifts. Yeah, because it's hopefully it's a gift that really changes who you are as a person, not just gaining skill sets. Anybody else want to add to that? I know I'm sure you all have thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I echo everything that Jen said. I think being around the cohort of people is one of the biggest gifts that you can't really quantify. I came at this from an interesting angle. So I had been with one company for my entire pre-GSB experience. So for me, one of the other gifts was really, walking into a different setting and kind of rediscovering, my own superpowers and really the confidence that, I can exist and thrive even more so outside of the environment that I had been in for so long. So I think, there's something to just testing yourself and proving to yourself that that those superpowers do exist. They're not situational, and that there are things that can carry you even further than you thought possible.
Yeah. So kind of on the flip side, what were some of the biggest challenges or, issues that you faced during your year? It's not all, easy peasy. So what were some of the things that you guys grappled with, during your time on campus? Geraldine, why don't you start?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. I think for me, one of my goals was ironically one of the things that I struggled with, which was unlearning a lot of ways of thinking, doing, leading. And so, when things become second habit to you, and when you learn new frameworks and new ways of doing things, it becomes almost sticky, right? And so for me, that was a big challenge. Learning to unlearn.
Yeah, that's really deep because we are a combination of our patterns, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you, Kate? What was some of your challenges and insights?
Yeah, so I was told before the program to be comfortable saying no, because there are going to be like more things than you can possibly fit in. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. And then I wasn't ready. And so I think there was an element that I struggle with sometimes to like stay grounded. Like for me, for a tangible example, like I wanted to come in and work on some hard skills because I'd kind of lived in the soft skill world. But then I found I really liked the soft skill classes because that's kind of the world that I lived in. And so I had to remind myself, like when I would talk to classmates, to be like, oh, I'm going to take this class, or I'm going to join this club, or I'm going to go to this event. And I'd be like, that sounds amazing. Like, is that like, should I do that, or should I do this other one that sounds a little bit scary? And so I think that piece of like being comfortable saying no, but also just like continuing to reground myself and like what I wanted to get out of the program and like where I should spend my time, like best aligned to that was more of a challenge, I think, than I thought it was. I thought I was ready to conquer it.
It's hard to say no sometimes. I don't know, Jen, do you have a thought on that? What were some of your biggest challenges?
Yeah, it's hard to say no all the time at the GSV. My biggest challenge is, balance doesn't exist. And so you have to come ready to go 100%. So having open dialogue with my partner, even my children, to let them know that this was 1 year, this is an opportunity. Mama has, the chance to be at one of the greatest institutions in the world, and this is why I'm busy. So trying to balance that as a mom, I think what helped me was I had actually thought a lot about what I wanted to do and why I was coming. And so that helped me filter the experience. but I had to say no to so much stuff and so much fun stuff too, as a mom. And I just stayed grounded of how grateful I was. I had, a community of moms back home cheering me on because it was such a unique experience to be here. So I just really grounded myself to that, as I had to say no. But even that, I was still having fun and still doing lots of great things beyond just studying.
Yeah, well, I've heard you took some of your classmates on a ski trip to Tahoe. People still talk about it. So you had some time for fun too.
Exactly.
How about you, Catherine?
So agree with all of the things. Saying no was never something I excelled at. I did get good practice, but wow, is it hard? Because, the FOMO, as they say, is very real at the GSP. But I think at a very basic level, one of the things that's hard at this point in my career was really just retraining my brain to be a student again. I'd been told over and over, don't underestimate how hard it's going to be and how busy you're going to be. And before I got to the GSB, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, have you seen my calendar for the last 2 years? This is going to be a walk in the park. This is amazing. And completely underappreciated the difference between being busy at work doing something you already know how to do with people you already know, and being busy learning things that either you hadn't done before or were trapped in the way back zone of your brain while trying to meet new people and adapt to a new environment. And it definitely had moments where I was like, wow, I used to be pretty good at this. Apparently that's been longer ago than I thought. So yeah, I mean, you work through it, you figure it out, but it was a very humbling first couple of weeks.
Yeah, and everybody's going through it, so at least you're not alone, and you have people that can help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we're talking to other women who are potentially thinking about doing this program and, potentially going through the application process, what advice would you give a prospective student thinking about this? And, what would you wish somebody told you before you actually started? Catherine, why don't you start and we'll work backwards?
Ooh, that's tough. I think for me, it's hard to really, one of the things I realized looking back is how hard it is to really let the advice really sink in before you get there and have that moment that makes it click so you have an aha. But the thing that I distinctly remember hearing in some of these kind of pre-MSX sessions that really stuck with me and took on more meaning over time was leave time for serendipity.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite understand what that meant when somebody first said it, but it was unique enough that it stuck in my brain. And I think what that really means is let the magic of the GSB happen. We've all talked about how there are this incredible cohort of people in the MSX class, this incredible cohort of MBAs, this incredible faculty, everything. And part of the magic of being there is leaving time to get to know those people and having the unscheduled moments that become a startup idea or a lifelong friendship or, any points in between. So that'd be my advice is when you're thinking about it, don't think of all the things that you want to fill your day with. Think about your main goals and then leave room to fill in the rest with the things that are just exciting.
Great advice. How about you, Geraldine? What were your points or suggestions or advice be?
Yeah, so I would completely echo what Catherine said about it was this piece of advice I think came from an alumni, and he phrased it as engineering time for serendipity. And I learned it the hard way early on when I packed my schedule back to back with classes and coffee meetings, etc. And then I found myself burning out. And so I took a step back and I started looking at my schedule and trying to just be okay with putting in breaks. And those breaks miraculously filled up. But instead of being filled up with busy time, it was filled up with time that actually rejuvenated and re-energized me. And so over time, that really helped to feed me in many ways. The second thing is, I think some of my fellow panelists have mentioned is knowing what you want going in and being okay saying no. The burnout is quite real. And so being okay with saying no in order to say yes to the things that really matter to you, that are meaningful to you. And so I constantly had to remind myself, quality over quantity. You don't have to be at everything, even though everyone else might be at a certain event or a certain talk or a certain panel. It's okay, because that's not necessarily in line with what you want. Throughout the program itself, you might have times where you might get distracted or influenced by what everyone else is doing. You might consider, this might be something that I want to do as well. But ultimately, if you have your North Star going in, I think that's going to help you stay true to your goals. And then the third thing is, this as well was a quote that I heard from a speaker, which is to go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And I think as women, a lot of times we tend to be people pleasers, and I think it's human nature to seek validation in a lot of forms. And so this piece of reminder was really helpful in really spending time on the people that value you, that lift you up, that celebrate you. And those are the people that are going to energize you. And as a result, you're going to be able to do what you do best, as opposed to seeking validation from people who don't necessarily value you.
That's a really lifelong lesson right there. That's well beyond just MSX. I love that. So thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
How about you, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an athlete, so I love goals. And I had those in mind, and I would call those my guardrails. But I gave myself actually a lot of grace to explore. And I think just that mindset of exploration reduced the pressure. I mean, I had wanted to come in doing entrepreneurship, but a lot has to come together to make that happen. And, there is a lot of luck involved in finding a co-founder and those other pieces. So I really let myself explore. I knew if that wasn't the ultimate outcome, that what my other outcome would be. And so that took a lot of the pressure off and made the experience a lot more fun. And then the other piece was I a little serendipitously, but did find a great network also outside of the GSB, where there's just so much diversity in skill set and outlook in the world, and made really great friendships with women in engineering, design, and those are also relationships I really cherish. So the GSB has so much to offer. You could spend your entire year just there, but if you explore and have that mentality, there's amazing other pockets to be found.
Yeah, totally. And how about you, Kate?
I'll go a little more tangibly and say, like, start the investment in yourself now. So even if you're in the, like, I think I might apply, like, use the application as part of like that discovery and self-discovery. And I'll give like two quick tangible examples. One, I remember there was a part of that application where it was like activities. And I think the first activity I put was like, I'm a mom, and this feels very unconventional, but like, that's where all of my time is. And so but I never would have put that on an application for something else. But it felt genuine at the time. And then second was like the essays. I actually met with a professor who became a mentor even earlier this week, literally 3 days ago. He's like, what did you write your essay about? And I was kind of taken aback, but it really like made me think, like, I'm glad I put in the time, but I probably could have put in a lot more into that and really started that kind of self-discovery and that self-investment even earlier than showing up on campus. So I guess my advice is, don't wait, like, own who you are, figure out what you want to get out of the program, and like start it now.
That's great advice, because that's part of the reason we ask the questions we do on the application, for self-reflection. And hopefully that gets you kind of aware about what you want to get when you come to Stanford. So I'm going to ask one more question of the panel, but I'd love for the audience, if you have questions for any of our panelists, you can actually, there is a Q&A window on the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if you guys want to start asking questions along the way, please start populating that, and then I'll read it to our panelists. But kind of while people are forming their thoughts, kind of this is always the reflecting question about what are some of the things you wish you knew going in, and what would you have done? Would you have done anything differently? Kate, you want to kick it off?
a lot has come up, right, in terms of like how, like, just some of the things we got out of the program, some of the advice we got before. So I won't repeat any of that. I'll go kind of just take it a little tangentially, but I wish I'd known like how amazing the experience was going to be for my family before I had done it, because that was one of my biggest concerns. And I thought it would be a great experience, but it really, I mean, my 5-year-old lived her best life in those, like in those courtyards, and she has no idea that that's not the real world, and she can't just run out and play like if there's streets and other things that we're navigating now. And she, like, we made lifelong friends with our neighbors, and my husband like came in and like ended up making a little bit of like a career pivot himself, and he is like much happier in his career than he was before. And so a lot of those concerns that I had at the outset about what will this year be like I wish like I could have like waved a magic wand and just known that like it was all going to be okay, and it would be probably even better than we expected.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. How about you, Catherine?
Similarly, I think, such a big change to kind of uproot your life and move and say, we're doing this now. I wish I had a way where I could have better conveyed to my husband how exciting and life-changing this could be for him too. Same thing, we both ended up meeting lifelong friends. He was definitely living a version of his best life using all of the Stanford facilities while we were here. And I think not that I feel like I didn't use my time well. It's almost like I wish I could have figured out a way to multiply time. But, I think looking back, where there were trade-offs that maybe I did feel the stress to finish or go over and above in a class assignment versus investing in people. I wish I would have, even earlier than I did, really been very clear about spending time and prioritizing relationships at all levels throughout the program. Because the people that you are spending time with are truly some of the most impressive humans you'll ever meet. And they're fun and they're interesting and they're exciting and they're all doing, fun and interesting and amazing things. And spending that time for me was one of the most kind of inspiring pieces of being at the GSB, is just all the different things that people are looking to tackle. And, if there's anything, and it's not that I didn't do this, but if there's anything that I just wish I could have sucked more out of the experience, it would have been that.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. I think we hear that too. How about you, Geraldine?
So for me, it was 3 things. One is that faculty, both professors and lecturers, truly want to connect and get to know you. So don't ask for permission, reach out to them. The worst that could happen is them saying no once, try again. And a lot of faculty are very generous with their time in sitting down with you, getting to know you. So do that and get out of your own way, which is the second piece of the advice that I wish I knew early on. So getting out of my own way, which is related to the imposter syndrome. You would be surprised by how many people at Stanford, not just at the GSB, live and breathe imposter syndrome every day, comparing yourself to everyone else in the classroom and around campus. And I think someone said the comparison is the thief of joy, and I think it's really true here. So just really trusting and believing in what you bring, the value that you bring to the community, to the classroom, to the cohort, and focusing on that as opposed to I don't belong here. I think it will be the second thing. And then the third thing is similar to what Catherine said, relationships. I think it's easy for a lot of people, having not been in a classroom for a while, prioritizing grades. But ultimately, I think many of us learned a lot more outside the classroom. Not to say that we didn't get any value in the classroom, we did, but it's the relationships that are lifelong. And those are the ones that are going to keep us humble and with the growth mindset for the rest of our life. I'll add one more bonus one. So I moved from Seattle, grew up in Singapore, lived in Vancouver, as you mentioned earlier, Catherine, and I didn't realize that California is really cold at night. So don't throw away your winter jackets, bring them with you. Don't make the same mistake that I did.
And that's from a Canadian. All right. Okay. And Kate, what about you?
I
Oh,
think we're
wait,
on
we
Jen.
did. Yes. Okay. I didn't hit Jen, right? I missed Jen.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I think they covered,
big
everything
things.
that is really there. I would just say, if you're a mom, just get organized in terms of infrastructure. So use the meal services on campus. And my children didn't need daycare, but we could have been a bit more organized with childcare and alleviating that pressure from my partner. And yeah, just think about how to make that easier and how to alleviate that pressure ahead of time.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So we have a few questions coming in on the chat in the Q&A window. So I'll just start throwing out the questions. One, it says, did any of you take courses related to women's leadership or women CEO that you would recommend? Anybody pursue those classes?
I did. I can speak to that. I mean, I think all the classes having to do with leadership cover kind of all aspects of it. So, it's not that you absolutely have to take one related to women's leadership to kind of hear some of the content, but I did take an amazing class. The exact name, of course, I am blanking on right now, but it's the faculty member. Her name is Laura Arriaga Andreessen, and she teaches an incredible course that is specifically about women in leadership. And she brings in kind of a who's who list of speakers of women who are leaders and at the top of their field, everyone from Mary Barra to Diane von Furstenberg, and, imagine all the people in between, and they were there. But, it was spectacular. It really explored different aspects of, the challenges that are unique to being a woman in a leadership position. But more important than that, and you see this in kind of all the guest speakers that come into classes at Stanford, is that because it's the GSB and because it's a small setting and because it's an off-the-record conversation, you're getting stories and challenges and things like that recounted that they would never, ever share in an interview or on a panel at a conference or anything like that. So when you ask questions about what went wrong and what do you wish you had known earlier, you get a very raw and honest answer, which is pretty spectacular and pretty, really like gives you more to think about than you could have possibly thought going into a class, just, that you knew was going to be good, but just a class at Stanford. And yeah, so things like that are pretty spectacular experiences that are very unique to being at the GSB.
Absolutely. Anybody else have a class or experience in women's leadership?
I'd just add that we all have access to individual coaching. And so for me, I really used those resources, had a lot of one-on-one sessions where I really explored my hangups, what was getting in my way. And it was a really transformational experience to be doing that in unison with all the other leadership classes.
And I'll add, just in addition to the classes and the one-on-one coaching, there's also a number of ways to get involved. So there's a women in management club, which I really enjoyed being a part of. And then it is continued like post GSB as well. They have something called women's circles, which like I absolutely cherish the like time I get every month with the GSB alumni who are in my women's circles from a wide range of years, and just the conversations that we get to have.
Yeah. Any other? Yeah, Geraldine?
Yeah, plus one on women in management. There's a ton of events and guest speakers throughout the year. That particular student organization is very active. So definitely recommend getting involved in that. I would say too, aside from classes that are women specific, there are a ton of classes out there that incorporate men, and them as allies. And I think those are critical too in shaping us as women leaders, or leaders without the women part. The ones that come to mind for me are Touchy-Feely for sure, Managing Growing Enterprises, which incorporates a lot of role plays, sometimes with gender elements at play. And those are critical. Another one that comes to mind is Equity by Design, which touches upon diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. And for me, that was instrumental because we had a ton of guest speakers, both men and women, touch upon women leadership and how to gain allies in the workplace and how to really get out of your own way as well.
Yeah, that's great information. There was a question in the chat or in the Q&A about kind of your experiences if you were interacting with MBAs, especially for somebody who may be on the younger end of the, the range of admitted students. What kind of experiences did you have in class and in clubs and just life at the GSB with MBAs?
Happy to start. So
Okay,
I lived
great.
in Schwab in my first 6 months and then JMAC in my last 6 months. My roommate was an MBA 1. And so I was very much, I got to know a lot of MBAs through her. But aside from that, being in Schwab and JMAC, you get to meet MBAs in your day-to-day interactions. And for me, I really enjoyed just walking up to them and getting to know them, because for the most part, they don't recognize you in classes, so they don't know who you are. But if you initiate the conversation, I think that really helps to break the ice. Beyond that, I think the student organizations that my fellow panelists and I have mentioned, that's a great way to work with, get to know MBAs. Some of the trips that they organize, unfortunately, MSXers are not either part of it or the timeline just doesn't work with our schedules, but there are social events like the unofficial student organization FOAM, Friends of RJ Miller, which is a great way to get to know people. But there are a ton of other non-party, non-event events as well that you can leverage to get to know MBA students and also in class. Several of us here were TAs as well in different classes, and that's a great way for you to interact with students, MBA students too.
Cool. Anybody else want to add to that?
I was just going to add to that quickly to say that, I think part of it is life stage, part of it, whatever, but, I'll speak for myself. In my mid to late 30s, I was, in a different frame of, what was the most critical thing to me than, folks in the MBA program who skew maybe mid to late 20s. But that said, I loved getting to know the MBAs that I really made friends with. I, count a number of them amongst close friends, leaving the GSB, and visited some of them and like run into them all over the place, which has been a lot of fun. I think I never experienced any sort of barrier between MSX and MBA. It's kind of just like a person to person thing. So, people reached out to me to say hello. I reached out to them to say hello. I think Geraldine mentioned being a TA. That was not something that was even on my radar that I thought I even could do. And then, worked with a member of the faculty who, is still one of my favorite people on earth, leaving the GSB, and ended up TAing for her and got to know a whole group of people just through that experience. That was just really fun. So, I'd say kind of back to some of those moments of serendipity, that's how you meet people. It's lunch, it's a comment in a class that makes you reach out and say, hey, I did the same thing, or I've experienced that, or wow, that's interesting, I'd love to talk to you about that. And I wouldn't necessarily look at it as like MSX v MBA. I just look at it as the GSB and a whole pool of people to get to know. Some of them who will be your best friends, some of them who will be acquaintances, and some who will be all the points in between.
Agreed. Anybody else want to add, or we move on to the next one? All right, so here's a question. It said, thank you for this session. Absolutely loved hearing everyone's thoughts. I want to know how you felt that how you handled leadership roles throughout your work experience in order to get into the MSX program, and how helpful were career services at the GSB for your post-MSX job opportunities. Anybody want to tackle that one?
I can, and please clarify the question if I'm not answering it in the way that you intended. I think in terms of the leadership experiences prior to the GSB, I'll admit I toyed around with the idea of going to business school for quite some time. Like I was a business major in undergrad. It kind of was always in the back of my mind, but it was never something that was super tangible until I actually had my second child and decided I think this is what I want to do. So I didn't consciously make any career decisions with like business school as an end goal in mind. And so I think like that the leadership experience I have was very much like tied to like the work that I was doing and loving the work that I was doing, business school aside. In terms of the second part of the question with the Career Management Center, I can speak to this because like my situation was very unique. I happened to be like 5 months pregnant when I graduated from the GSB and like was excited to be welcoming my third and final child, but it obviously like made the career search like look a little bit different. So I found the CMC to be very useful. I also will say like one of their big pieces of advice and one of their big pushes is like to expand your network and to lean on the people that you may have already known or the people that you can meet through doing the work yourself. So there is a job board, there are opportunities that come across, but a lot of it is like the support in doing the legwork yourself. And so whether it's interview prep or strategy or revamping your LinkedIn, whatever it may be, they're going to be there for you. But it's not like they're not placing you in positions. You're going to go out and find what you want. And they're a huge resource like during the process, during the year, and then even after the year concludes to help you achieve what it is that you want.
Yeah. And we also encourage people, don't wait to the very end with career services, jump on that pretty quickly, just so you can make the most of your year, because you'll blink and it'll be done. Anybody else want to add?
Sure. Yeah. So,
go ahead.
Jen, go ahead. Oh, thanks. So Kate mentioned not having an end goal, a business school not being an end goal in mind, and that really resonated with me too. I think for similar to what Kate mentioned, it was to answer the first question, it was more about the why business school, why MSX, why now, and identifying the gaps. Does it make sense? Being honest with myself and asking myself, is going to business school an ego thing, or is this really going to fill a gap? Because it is there's a big opportunity cost here. It's a full-time program. Yeah, I saw a question about that earlier. You're going to be taking time away, and it's not just time to relax and take a break necessarily, but it's time to grow in as a leader, as a person. I like to think of business school not just as business school, but school of life, and teaches you a lot of different soft skills. The second question, I did spend quite a fair bit of time with the CMC, specifically with Bill Thompson. He was instrumental in helping me with compensation negotiation. So before going back to Amazon, I joined a startup, and this is the first time I joined a startup, and I wasn't really all that familiar with their compensation packages, with equity and all of those stuff. So having Bill as a sounding board, as someone that I could just turn to at any given moment, I kid you not, during the weekends as well, he was willing to meet with me. That was incredibly valuable, and for that I'll be always grateful.
Yeah, that's important to have a resource like that. Jennifer, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say I was exploring 2 tracks. So one was entrepreneurship, which obviously doesn't receive support from the Career Center because you're out there building, but there's tons of other resources. So there's the Entrepreneurship Center, there's professors that are key in that. So even outside of that role, there's huge infrastructure to help with pursuing that career path. But I did use the Career Center in parallel because I was exploring what working in health tech might look like on its own. And yeah, I got huge value out of just how to position my story, how to communicate it, how to tap into the network of the GSB, which then I utilize even in the entrepreneurship side. So there are plenty of resources, whether professors, career service, or other networks to tap into.
Yeah. We have a couple more career-related questions. Here's one. It says, did you feel any challenges when you had to restart your career after taking a year of study? And what were some of the most useful resources that you had going back out into the workforce from your, from the school or your classmates? Kind of a hybrid question. Anybody want to jump on that one?
I can get us started with that, I guess. I mean, I think the short answer to that question is emphatically no. I don't feel like I had a challenge restarting things. I think my biggest challenge was really figuring out, this was over the course of the program, figuring out what direction that I wanted to go. And I think the biggest resources and kind of gifts for that are really the people that we met along the way. So, the people and the conversations that have helped me shape my thinking, the people who have opened doors and made connections for me, and the people who've really been invested in where I'm going and kind of helped be my cheerleaders along the way, even where, I might have had a confidence wobble somewhere. So, I think the resources are very both tangible and intangible. And, it's really up to you to figure out which way you want to go. And then the whole like weight of resources of, the people that you meet, the people that, the traditional resources like the CMC that you can ask for help will come and support you whichever direction you want to go.
Anybody else had challenges with reentry? Geraldine?
Yeah, I can chime in. So not necessarily a challenge per se. I think one of the beauty of the program is that it's 1 year. It might feel like a long time when you start it and when you take a break from your current career, but the year goes by so quickly. During the middle of the program, I was thinking, wow, 6 months has passed and we only have 6 more months. I really have to cherish every single moment. So the great thing is that re-entering the workforce didn't necessarily feel like a huge shift. I will say, however, that the 1 year, because of how packed it was, and due to choices of mine to take on a lot of different things, if I were to do one thing differently, I think I wouldn't have jumped back into the workforce so quickly. So I graduated in December, started my new job, the startup that I mentioned earlier, in January. And I think if I were to do things differently, I would have taken at least a month or 2 off just to internalize the learnings, to reflect, to kind of recover from this intense whirlwind year of wonderful things, and to stay connected with classmates and faculty. So that's the only thing I would have changed. In terms of resources, certainly people, as Catherine mentioned, so faculty and classmates. Also frameworks from classes. There are a lot of frameworks from classes like Conversations in Management and Managing Growing Enterprises that I still use on a day-to-day basis, not just in the workplace, but in my personal life as well. And finally, even though you're an alumni, faculty is still willing to meet up and connect with you and bounce ideas and have you bounce ideas off of them. So, I think being an alumni, I think, is a gift for life. And I think that's something that we should remind ourselves, as opposed to just because we've left campus, we're no longer part of the community. I think that's couldn't be further from the truth.
I agree. I always tell people that's the value proposition, is the lifelong affiliation. It's not just the 1 year. Anybody else want to add to that? So we're coming up to the end of our hour, so I won't be able to get to everyone's questions, but I thought we could end on something kind of positive and fun. And we can just go around quickly and say, what was your favorite class or club activities when you were a student here? Geraldine, you're up. Why don't you take that one?
Very cliche answer, touchy-feely.
That's kind of, yeah. Do you want to give a little background about what touchy-feely is, though, for those who aren't aware?
Yeah, absolutely. So the formal name is Interpersonal Dynamics. And it is a class that really focuses on your soft skills, how to be more self-aware, how to be able to relate better with others, how to be, how to have better communication skills, especially in managing conflict. And the class is set up, unlike other classes that are more lecture-based or seminar-based. This class has kind of multiple facets. So there's the lecture portion, but the real magic of this class, this course, really happens in what we call T group, which is short for training group, where you are paired with a group of 10 to 12 other classmates and 2 facilitators. And every week you sit in a room and there's no agenda whatsoever. And it might sound uncomfortable, but it really forces you to be honest and to have conversations with each other, about yourself, and to be vulnerable. And I think that vulnerability was really the key to unlocking a lot of learnings about yourself and others in a room, and how you relate to other people, and ultimately interpersonal dynamics, which then lends itself to improving your skills as a leader and as a person, and all the roles that you play in your personal life.
Yeah, that's why people love it so much. How about you guys? We'll go quickly. Jen, what was your favorite class or club?
Startup Garage. And for me, that's like the marquee class around entrepreneurship. And what I loved about it is it demystified the process of starting a company. So we often think we have to be hit by lightning with the perfect idea, but this class just shows the process and how you work through building off of your hypothesis. And that it's really just like getting out there and testing and being on the ground. And
did you do it for 2 quarters?
I did. And that was also the infrastructure in which I recruited people from outside the GSB and had a cross-disciplinary team, which was really great.
Very cool. Catherine, what was yours?
So mine is a bit of a controversial choice. It's called Paths to Power. And for me, it was one of the most transformative classes in that it forced me to kind of rethink some of the very long and deep held beliefs as someone who grew up in middle America and is, very well ingrained in the, do good work, keep your head down approach. And to really, I think Geraldine used the phrase earlier in this, to learn how to get out of my own way and make clear, what my goals are and figure out how to get there without feeling kind of the normal female guilt about doing it. So that was incredible for me. And then beyond that, with one of my other classmates, we started a bit of a speaker series for the MSXers called MSX Moments. And we did a bunch, probably 20 different sessions with different interesting members of the faculty, people who came through as guest speakers and everything, just to kind of create connections amongst our class and spend some really intimate time with some of the people who were the most interesting ones that came through our path at the GSB.
Fascinating. It's like a mini view from the top, it sounds like.
Kind of, yeah.
That sounds great. And how about you, Kate?
I can't pick, if I have to pick one class, I'll say conversations in management, but even saying that, like, it's very hard. There's not one elective that I took that I regret taking. So I'm also happy to connect with anyone offline if you have like more specific questions on that. And then outside of the classes, my family and I love going to the Stanford's sporting events. Stanford's very, very good in the college athletics scene. And it was a lot of fun for my kids to get to go to see all those different sports as well.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way just to feel like you're really part of a campus community. But I loved your feedback. I always tell people when they say, about electives, your biggest challenge isn't, will I get the one you want? It's how do you narrow down from all the options and choices? And it's an abundance of choice. And sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. But yeah, I think that's the beauty of a place like Stanford. But I want to thank you all so much. We are at time. I know we couldn't get to everyone's questions, but feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy if anybody's out there has further questions that you'd like me to follow up on, I'm happy to do it. And I wanted to thank our panelists today for spending an hour with us. So insightful and helpful. And we would love to have more fabulous women in the program like you guys. So thank you for sharing your stories, your insights and recommendations. And we will be posting this recording on our website for those of you if you'd like to go back and look at it again. But thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend and a special thanks to the panel. Thanks, everyone. Take care all. Bye.